all you can do is try to imagine and wonder what makes 4 adults agree that this is okay. That's the big question.
The 16 children rescued from the so-called House of Horrors in Vinton County are now safe, but even Siders' family members are raising questions about how this could have happened, and they have ideas about what was going on in the family. We're digging into all of it. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix.
Court records filed in Vinton County list the charge simply as child endangering. 16 counts. 16, not 1, not 2. A number so large, the indictment reads less like a legal document and more like a roll call. That is where this story begins. Not with an accusation, but with a number no prosecutor in that courthouse had ever had to type before. Picture a single house at the end of a dead-end road, woods on 3 sides, a railroad yard out front, one neighbor close enough to see it, and not one child ever seen. That is the image that defines this entire case. A house that looked, from the outside, like nothing at all.
And my only assumption is they've never lived anywhere other than this home in Hamden, which is on a dead-end road with only one other home on the other side of them. There's woods and foliage all around this home, and then in front of the house is a railroad yard. And so it was somewhat very secluded. The one neighbor says, I don't recall seeing a child. I haven't talked to him myself, but, nobody's seen 16 children. And, or anybody imagine somebody having 16 kids in our modern time. But it is what it is. There's multiple sets of twins here. And so that probably drove the number up. So, but, it's mind-boggling. I've been there myself. I wanted to see the home, so I could better represent and have some knowledge. I'm just like everybody else. All you can do is try to imagine and wonder what makes 4 adults agree that this is okay. That
absence, the absence of a single sighting, a single school enrollment, a single grocery store regular, is the visual anchor of everything that follows. Before we go deeper into what the records actually show, make sure you're subscribed to the Crime Infinity, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. On June 30th, law enforcement in Vinton County, Ohio, entered a home on Omar Street in the village of Hamden and found 16 children, ranging from a year and a half to 18 years old, living in what investigators described as squalor. The parents, Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, were arrested and charged with 16 counts of child endangering each.
The Siders kids are safe, but are they all right? The 16 Siders children, ranging in age from 1.5 to 18, are with foster families more than 2 weeks after law enforcement says they found them living in absolute squalor in a house on Omar Street in the village of Hamden. Mark Johnson is the state representative for Vinton County and parts of other Ohio counties. He's going to join me in a moment to discuss the very latest on the children, the case, and the investigation. Those parents of the children, Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, remain in jail, charged with 16 counts of child endangering. They've pleaded not guilty to the charges. The grandmother of the children, Christina Siders, has also pleaded not guilty to the same charges and remains behind bars. Gary Sr. is out of jail receiving treatment for a serious medical condition, and his competency is being evaluated. He has pleaded not guilty as well. Now, no one, and I mean no one, can understand how 16 children were in a house, not enrolled in school, and how no one seemed to know about them, not even distant family members. One family
pleaded not guilty. The children's grandmother, Christina Siders, was also charged and also pleaded not guilty. Their grandfather, Gary Siders Sr., was not jailed. He's receiving treatment for a serious medical condition, and the court is currently evaluating his competency to stand trial. Here is the sentence that should stop you cold. none of the 16 children were enrolled in school. Not one. In a country with mandatory attendance laws, with truancy officers, with entire departments built to catch exactly this kind of silence, 16 children fell through every single wire. They were seen, when they were seen at all, after 9:30 at night at a Dollar General, buying what they needed under cover of darkness. A hardware store clerk recalled Gary Jr. coming in once, over a year earlier, to buy plumbing supplies. That's it. That is the entire documented public footprint of a family raising 16 children in a modern American county. A ghost family, hiding in plain sight. 16 strong.
That's the big question, that. And then I talked to the hardware store. He said Gary Jr. had been in there one time, bought some plumbing. That was well over a year ago. And he said, other than that, we never seen any of them. I'm told that they went to the Dollar General, and when they did go to the Dollar General, it was after 9:30 p.m. or somewhere close to dusk or after dark, or the last customer there. None of it makes any sense, to be quite honest. And when you try to reason why, you have 4 adults think that this is okay. The children was not enrolled in school. That in itself is an issue. Was they running from the truancy issues and running from CPS? Maybe. I mean, they packed up and moved quite often, which is for no good reason that anybody can tell.
Mm-hmm.
That they had a home base down in Gallia County, is my understanding.
Joel Potts, the head of the Department of Children and Youth, was in front of the controlling board earlier this week, and you all sent $1 million, allocated $1 million to send down there to help care just for these children. Obviously, there may be more money needed. Did Mr. Potts say anything about, what was your understanding from Mr. Potts's testimony or his discussion in front of the controlling board about whether his agency aired here or anything to that effect?
I questioned Mr. Potts and myself. I said, did anybody drop the ball or anybody not doing their job? And the answer was,
this is the pattern. A family this size does not vanish by accident. It vanishes on purpose. Now, rewind, because the paper trail didn't start on Omar Street. It started years earlier in Gallia County at a different house where 6 of the older children were marked habitually truant by the local school district in the fall of 2021. Under Ohio law, that classification puts children one step from being labeled unruly by the court. A case was opened, but court records show it went nowhere because the county could not locate Gary and Elizabeth Siders to serve them with the paperwork. The parents were already gone, already moving, already 3 steps ahead of the system that was supposed to be watching. A man later renovating that same Gallia County house told a local outlet what he found inside. Children's clothing stuffed in the attic as if someone had been living up there. Human and animal waste throughout the property. He used one word to describe the condition of the house: rough. That renovation happened after the family had already left. The evidence of what those children endured outlived the family's presence in that house by years. Here is the irony that should sit with you. This family didn't hide because they had nothing. Property and utility records show the Siders had at least 4 prior addresses in Gallia County alone before the move to Vinton County sometime in 2020 or 2021. They didn't fail to find housing. They failed to stay found.
The thing I don't fully understand is, or that I can't wrap my mind around, is how could this ever get to this point? Of that many children for that long, how, and I don't know all the details, could that even take place? It almost was as if we stumbled upon it by accident. And so could you help us understand who is responsible on the investigative or prevention side, between the county and the state. I know that when we find children in that state, the counties are responsible, and that is what we've been trying to fund, especially with the remarkable work that your department has been doing to get the child wellness campus up, so we actually have longer term placements. But could you speak to about the system of actually finding these cases? And I just don't know how anybody could say that this going on for as long as it did, that our systems are working as needed. And I call all of my colleagues that we have to do more, and we cannot look away, and we cannot just say that these are the counties and they didn't do enough. And I'm sure there's going to be investigation, but if something is structurally wrong, if it's policy, if it's more money, but could you speak to directly what is the state's role when it comes to actually finding these kids or making sure that departments are doing their jobs? What role
If
do we
Gallia
have?
County had simply managed to serve that truancy paperwork in 2021, if one process server had caught up with this family one time, would 16 children still have ended up in a house with feces on the floor 3 years later? The system had the file. The system just never had the family standing still long enough to open it. State officials have been careful at press conferences and in legislative hearings to note something specific. As far as anyone can determine, Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Siders never applied for SNAP benefits, never requested public assistance, never appeared in the systems designed to flag a struggling family of 18. The only documented income trace so far belongs to the grandparents, Social Security payments. A state representative who covers Vinton County put it plainly in a public interview. For 40 years in public service, he said, he had never seen anything like this. A family this large that never once appeared on the state's radar.
For 40 years, I've never seen anything like this. This is to have kids that would be off the radar. A child off the radar is terrible enough. 16 kids in one family in one household. To be off the radar is something that I've just not seen. So I do think that as we go through and do our investigations and we talk to these kids and we really start looking at things, we'll have a much better sense about how we can certainly improve the system. But I do think that the community, they do report things. They do request help or support for kids, and we want them to continue to do that. And we'll, I'm sure, have a much better sense of just where things could be better and where we can improve them as we go down.
So it does not appear that Gary Jr. and Elizabeth were receiving state benefits for their children. The Attorney General...
Off the radar. That phrase matters because it is the second half of the moral refrain running underneath this entire investigation. They were seen, and still they vanished. Court records, school records, renovation records, every document confirms these children existed, were counted, were briefly glimpsed. And every one of those documents also confirms that no single agency ever connected the dots long enough to knock on the right door before June 30th. They were seen, and still they vanished. That's true of the Gallia County truancy file. It's true of the renovator who found children's clothes in an attic and moved on. It's true of the one neighbor on that dead-end road who told reporters simply, "I don't recall seeing a child," despite living within sight of 16 of them. The Ohio Department of Children and Youth's director appeared before the state controlling board this past week after lawmakers approved $1 million specifically earmarked to care for these 16 children. A state representative asked him directly, on the record, whether anyone in his agency had dropped the ball. The answer, according to that representative, was no. No one had failed to do their job, because procedurally, no one in his agency had ever opened a case on this family to fail at all. That is not a defense. That is the entire indictment of the system in one sentence. You cannot fail a case you never had.
We can't really figure this out, why somebody with 16 children didn't ask for help. To my knowledge, they didn't ask for SNAP benefits or any type of public assistance on that type of nature, which doesn't make sense to start with if you're not working and or care about your children. But I find that this whole thing very troubling, very hard to reason with here.
Mm-hmm. You know, Vinton County is a small.
They were seen, and still they vanished. A third time, and this one is the most damning, because it isn't about a school district or a caseworker. It's about the space between two counties. Gallia County had a truancy complaint on record for 6 of these children in 2021. By the time the family surfaced in Vinton County, that information, if it traveled at all, traveled nowhere useful. Lawmakers are now asking on camera in public hearings whether Ohio's counties even share truancy and welfare flags with each other. The honest answer, so far, has been not reliably. Not in any way that would have caught a family who kept moving one county ahead of its own paperwork. The prosecutor in this case, William Archer, has stated publicly that the extent of state involvement he's aware of relates to the grandparents' benefits, not the parents. The Ohio Attorney General's office has since acknowledged that Elizabeth and Gary Jr. appear to have deliberately concealed the children's existence from any agency that might have intervened. Concealment, not oversight failure, is the working legal theory. But concealment only works when the systems around a family are this porous. When a truancy file in one county can simply expire because nobody could find the people it was written about.
Well, it's a confounding case. I know you've been around a while. We hear about child neglect cases, Representative Johnson, but, kids being kept in the house like this, if this allegation is indeed true that they weren't allowed outside, the kids are in bad shape, they were given phones to hang out on social media, the older ones, they're not going to school. It is disturbing, and it boggles the mind as to why nobody was asking for any type of help whatsoever.
Right. And I assume that the family members, they communicated through social media, is my understanding. It's all rather bizarre, but I think more information will come out where we can address some things as far as the legislature. And I think Senator George Lang said it best. I'd rather err on putting too much funds into children's services than not enough. And that I think we will take a hard look at things come the next operating budget on funding on that side of it. Can we have more visits when somebody does file a complaint, more checks? Until somebody files a complaint, Children's Services is not aware of anything, and that's an issue. And when you isolate yourself and come out at dark, nobody, not even your neighbors, knows you have children. I don't know how anyone could expect a government service to deal with a case similar to this. Let's just hope that we never.
The 16 children are now with foster families, though officials have not confirmed whether all 16 remain within Vinton County. A county so small by population, it is the least populous in the entire state. And one that a state legislator has openly admitted may not have anywhere near enough licensed foster homes to keep siblings this numerous together, let alone nearby.
I'd like to bring in Representative Mark Johnson. He represents in the Ohio legislature the district that covers all of Vinton County. So, Representative Johnson, thank you so much for joining me.
Not a problem. I'm happy to be here.
This is a horrible case. I wish we were talking about something more joyful, a little happier. But thank goodness these 16 children are safe and they have been indeed placed in foster care. Is that your understanding?
That is correct.
Are they, outside of Vinton County? Because Vinton County is a small county. It's the least populous county in the state. I can't imagine that there are enough families there who are foster parents that they could all remain in that county.
I can't imagine it either. So one can only assume at this point in time, because I don't know. I would assume that at least some of them have gone outside the county. I truly don't know where they're at. And I don't know if that type of information is ever released, being juveniles. So I truly don't know. And, so I guess time will tell on that.
There are so many questions surrounding this case. You're a member of the state legislature. You're a part of allocating funding here. A lot of people are asking, was Children's Services, involved with this family? We have information that Gallia County had visited them. We've seen the truancy complaints.
Yeah.
Obviously, they weren't in Gallia County anymore and hadn't been for many years, but they were up in Vinton.
Two separate legal battles are now unfolding in parallel to the criminal case. Christina Siders' attorney has requested a non-dissemination order seeking to limit what officials can publicly release about the case going forward. And a gag order issued in Gary Siders Jr.'s case is currently being challenged at the Ohio Supreme Court, a fight over how much of this story the public is even allowed to keep watching unfold in real time.
Gary Jr., Elizabeth, and Christina Siders remain in jail. They have not been able to post bail. They've all pleaded not guilty. Christina Siders' attorney is actually asking for a non-dissemination order to limit what can be said or released by officials about the case. A gag order issued in Gary Jr.'s case is being challenged at the Ohio Supreme Court. And we're, of course, going to keep an eye on this case. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me or drop them in the comments. That's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.